Hello, everybody. We're here to talk about the reality of accompanying each other through end of life. And what I would like to do today is describe by having these two people, these wonderful people, Nathalie and Laurie Sweet, tell us about their experience, not only of journeying through dying and death with a loved one, but how end of life support, end of life, a doula in this case, Nathalie is an end of life doula. And I would like for you all to understand, many people go, oh, I love the sound of that. I love the idea of that, but how does it work? And so, what I'd like for them to share with us today is their experience, because every time anyone works with an end of life doula, it could look in any way, because the needs for each person are a little different. Even though we're all going through the same kind of thing, the needs may be a little different. And the experience level of the doula might be a little different. And so, the ways that we're supporting as a doula could be a little different. So I just wanted to give you go on a journey with us, because I haven't heard the full story either, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So welcome, Nathalie, and welcome, Laurie. Would you like to say something first before we get started? Nathalie, start with you.
First, Deanna, I am so glad to be talking to you today, and I am so grateful to Laurie for her presence and being able to um, explain to us how she felt about the support that she received while her mother was declining during and after her death. I felt personally very honored to be of support to Laurie, and very humbling experience. And I felt very honored that she let me in to her life. To me, this is really this is the first step to getting some help. You know, accepting to have somebody come and witness you within your very intimate moments in times of vulnerability. So to me, this is very special. So thank you.
Very beautiful. Yes, Laurie, please, just before we get started, please let us know who you are a little bit, and how you
Sure.
came to ask Nathalie into your world.
So I had a business as a birth doula for the last 7 years, and I had doulas attend both of my births of my older and younger children. And so it was very natural for me to want to look for a guide, particularly just for me, because not all the members of my household were open to what was happening and were aware of what was happening. So I don't believe in coincidences. A friend invited us to brunch over the summer, and unlike a lot of my friends, Nathalie just asked me point blank how my mom was doing, and so I had a moment to talk to her about that. And when I got to Pennsylvania, I tried to find a local doula because I recognize how important it is for those face-to-face meetings, for someone to be able to hold your hand. But because of COVID, and Pennsylvania is a very big state, I wasn't able to find anybody that could come and meet me at this very last minute. From start to finish, it was 4 weeks. And so Nathalie was able to step in, and I would argue, although I have no point of reference, give me everything that she would have given me in person. I felt like she held my hand and walked beside me and planted little seeds so that I knew what to expect, so that I didn't have any fear, and that I felt open to what was happening. And it made a very sad, difficult time a time without fear, and a time to just cherish those last moments. And if I didn't have Nathalie holding my hand and texting me and calling me just when I needed her to call me and telling me what to expect just a few days before things would happen, it would not have been the experience that it was. So I am so grateful for Nathalie's guidance of me in my mom's final weeks.
That is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I also want to, so the reason why we're here, and I want this to be known too, because I don't want people to think out there that doulas are just slinging it around in the wild, wild west by themselves. Nathalie and I are in community. And so we're in community where people go for support to help each other with our clients, with our own lives, with our own families walking through dying and death, people who know what they're doing. And so as we're talking, and we always leave details out about who and what, as we're sharing, I saw how phenomenally Nathalie was supporting the person she was supporting, and we were supporting her, and I knew that she had a special story to share. And so this is to me, what is uncommon about this between Nathalie and Laurie, why I was so happy they wanted to talk with us, is because it was pretty high level of interventions and things you needed to do. And it wasn't just, I mean, there is a place for being the presence that all doulas are, the witness, the companion, the guide. And all of that is enough. Without that, nothing else will happen. And it's because of the additional parts of what Nathalie was able to do, because of her skill set, because of what she could bring and what Laurie wanted to do. It's beautiful and powerful. So that's the part I want people to know, that it's not just hand-holding, though. That's, if without that, forget it. You don't want anybody around who you can't establish that kind of intimacy. And that sets the stage for whatever else needs to happen. If that doula is equipped and is able, it can. And so I just want people out there, people who may be considering hiring an end-of-life doula, it's okay. I just want you you need to interview them like you would anybody else, like you would interview anybody else, the plumber. I even interview my butcher. You want to interview anybody that's going to be in your home. What's your background? I want you to ask them, who's your support? I don't believe that unless a person has many, many, many years of experience at the bedside, like a hospice experienced professional, has many, many, many years behind them, I don't believe it's wise that we're operating by themselves. I don't even operate by myself. I have people I can tap into, like this support group that I'm talking about right now. I don't even operate by myself, and I have 20 years of hospice nursing behind me. So I believe that every doula needs to have support. And please, now, I just want to let it go. I want to let Nathalie and Laurie talk about what happened. So who would like to go first about setting up how it began that you all came together?
Laurie, go ahead.
Okay.
So I referred to that lunch that we had together over the summer, where we hadn't seen each other very much after this wonderful experience that we had doing this choir about 2 years ago. And I think the very first reach out to Nathalie is palliative care end of life? And she said, call me.
There you go.
So I called her, and I think things just sort of, snowball sounds like the wrong word, right? That sounds like but like developed.
See it more as a dance.
There.
I really see it more. Sorry if I interrupted.
No, go ahead.
More as a dancing, really much as dancing tango or dancing another ballroom, where we connected, and then I was able to hear you, and you were able to hear me too, and we were able to adjust every moment.
That's the doula dance. Okay,
That's
I'm going to take notes. I'm going to take notes.
That is the doula dance.
Skills. And if I may be able to dance, if the person in front of me does not understand that notion, it's not going to work as well as it worked with Laurie and I, because Laurie, turns out, is a dancer too.
We were dancing. We were figuratively, physically. But what I think is interesting about our story is that Nathalie's in Connecticut and I was in Pennsylvania caring for my mom. I never felt any distance between the two of us. So the first week that I was in PA, my mom was in the hospital. And that was unbelievably challenging and frustrating for me, because she had called me and told me I'm ready to go. And I had a couple days with my family. I read a wonderful book that was very helpful. I got my COVID test, and as soon as I was negative, off I went. But when I got there, the hospital wouldn't let me see her. And so you would think, oh, maybe that wasn't, Nathalie's area. No, it was. And we reached a point where I escalated as high as I was comfortable, and then realized that no, I was not going to be able to see her so long as she was in the hospital. And then she elected hospice on her own. And so it shifted from, trying to see her to, okay, now we are getting bedding and, getting ready for her to come home. But Nathalie was with me for that week long that she was in the hospital, checking in and saying, you could call the medical director, or you could call patient relations, or you could do this, or you could do that. Just like a birth doula would, give me options, give me information, give me support, and then let me choose where I want to go and how high I want to go with escalation. And so then when I said I, was exhausted just fighting the system and fighting the nurses and trying to get a FaceTime call set up that I later found out my dad prevented me from having. That's a story for another day. She's like, okay, so you're at peace with where you're at in this process? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, then that's where we're just going to let things be right there. And we'll revisit it if she doesn't come home on Friday. And then she came home, and then it was another shift, more dancing, more information, different support, but still very present. And that's what I really want to underscore, is that I know the job of a birth doula. I know the comfort measures, the information, the resources, and we never had any physical contact. And yet I felt that she was with me, by my side, sometimes dragging me, sometimes waiting for me, but I felt her there, even though several states kept us apart. And anytime I needed her, I would send a text message, and she would either call right away, or she would say, hey, can we talk? And I'd say, our day helper is going to leave at 3. I'll call you at 4 when my brother gets over here. It was always so perfectly well-timed. It was exactly when I needed her. She said what I needed to hear. She gave me information. And I mean, it was empowering, if you could use that word. I felt like I became my mom's advocate very rapidly. She had 3 weeks from the time she came home until the time she died. So I needed to embrace that role very, very quickly. And I felt supported and uplifted by her to take on more and more responsibility and more care, and inquire with the hospice nurses, and inquire with her case manager, and ask for a team meeting, and ask for things that I needed, and always with my mom in mind.
That is powerful. You just said something that I don't know who would answer this, but what you just said was Nathalie supported you in a way that didn't take away from what you wanted to even do. It even enabled you to perform on a higher level of action. And so it wasn't that Nathalie took the action from you. Nathalie didn't even tell you what to do. She helped you with options. You discerned what you wanted. Because of her support, then you were able to you were able to function at a higher level. Did I hear that right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, Nathalie, what were you doing? Tell us, Kenshi, Laurie, behind the scenes, now that you're here at this place together, do you recall what was going through your mind as Laurie was, what guided you in this time to not overtake, because we tend to want to fix and all of that?
This is being, as I said at the beginning, being able to be accepted and accepted within the intimacy of a person and a family. I shift to a different state. I remember talking to somebody on a podcast a year ago about that. So what happens? And I generally, so whether in this case it was virtually.
It was what?
It was virtual. It was virtual, right? It was virtually.
Virtual, right? Okay.
Virtual, yeah. But it's the same when I've been doing this for 4 years. When I encounter a person, what I do is I feel the connection, and then whenever I'm set as being of service, I focus only on the person I'm with. I'm working with. I never take, 3 clients at the same time. I work with one person at a time, and it's a little bit like an actor, a performer. I really feel the character, so I enter that space and I leave everything that is, my clothing or my own worries at the door, outside, and I enter a space where I put my thoughts as if I were the person. I become, I pull in all the resources, and it's very hard for me to express what goes on. So
It
as if
sounds
I would.
good. You're doing good, Nathalie. The way I frame this is you're putting on your doula shoes. You're actually
On
going
my
into and embodying a new aspect of
Yes.
yourself.
And
Yeah.
in that process, by empowering, Laurie, I empower myself. I'm actually digging into my own power, and it's magical.
It is.
It's magical. It's just very hard to express with words, and I'm seeing that a
Well,
lot.
you did though. You consciously
I shift my
accompanied
mom.
her. You shifted from Nathalie, what's best for, or what Nathalie wants to do, more into shifting into a place where you're tuning into her and what she wants.
Mhm.
It feels like you really did that instead of, because a lot of doulas come, give me a template. What's the assessment form? Da, 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 da. And I'm always trying to readjust people's thinking about that and just let that go and be with the person you're with and really tune in, just like you did with Laurie. So
And
Laurie, how
listen,
did it
you
feel?
just
Go ahead.
listen. Yeah, you just listen. You try to understand where this person is, and then you just dive in with all my authenticity and like my own lack of fear, but then my humanity. I was able to dive into Laurie's experience.
So tell us what the first thing was that you can remember, that it was going to be more than just emotional in the moment on the phone. Like, what was the first thing that you all remember that you needed a little bit more, Laurie, than just a few soothing words? Like there was something bigger than that you needed.
I think for me, it was, I asked Nathalie if it was okay for me to send pictures of my mom, even though she had never met her. Like I said, things happened so very quickly. And so the photos were a way for me, because I was with her and caring for her overnight and all weekend. It was hard for me to get distance. And so I asked her if it was okay, because, I wanted to honor my mom's privacy, but I needed somebody to kind of see her the way
Wow.
my dad wasn't able to see her. And because we had different nurses coming in every day, we had no continuity. There was no one I could check in with and say, should I go home? Like, what's our timeline here? And so I remember sharing a picture of her, and Nathalie said, "What's her name?" And I said, "Lynn." And she's like, "Oh, Lynn, you're so beautiful." And for someone to take the time to name her and see her was very emotional. It's still emotional and very meaningful to me. The hospice nurses were wonderful, and every time they were with her, they were fantastic. But there was just something about the way Nathalie would name her and always ask about Lynn. How is Lynn doing? That was really honoring and powerful. So
Beautiful.
not something, I don't know, not, I, as a birth doula, we have contracts. So not in the contract, above and beyond. And it was just very important for me that she did that, among many other things that she did.
Yeah, how about some more? Give me something else that's something that you don't get unless somebody like this is around. Like, that is beyond. What you just described was so special. It gave me chills.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
can
something. Yeah, go ahead.
I can think of one more thing. I got tag teamed between Nathalie and a very good friend
Yes.
who had lost both of his parents. And so at the time, as her life was nearing its end, Nathalie and I spoke, and another friend and I spoke, and they offered to bathe her. And my immediate response was, I don't think I can do that. I don't know if I want to do that. Isn't that something hospice is going to do? Isn't the funeral home going to do that? And so, I let it just kind of sit with me. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days before she died. And Nathalie just walked me through what that might be like and why I might want to do that. And just like I said, it was an offering. It was just left out there like a little seed that you drop along the path to maybe scoop up and examine and say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't. And so, and the other thing was to take my time. So my mom passed, was 4 weeks ago today, around 10:45 at night. And we waited probably 2 or more hours to make any phone calls. So we didn't call the funeral home. We didn't call hospice. When we did, we said, well, there's certainly no rush. I know you have a job to do to come and pronounce her, but please don't hurry. We don't need help. We're okay. And I had already called them earlier in the night when that death rattle had set in and gave them a heads up. And I had already told them, and I told the funeral home that I wanted to bathe her.
Yes.
And I bathed her. My aunt and I bathed her, and it was magnificent and magical and just a way to connect with her body. My aunt had said, it's just her shell. Her spirit is gone. But it wasn't just her shell. As her child, I came out of her body.
Came out of her.
And so framing it in that way, I bathed her without fear. I bathed her with love and acceptance and gratitude for the body that brought me into the world. And it was extremely powerful. And same with the advice for having a private viewing. I did not want to do that. Because of COVID, we did not have a public viewing. The funeral was very small. And again, that was another place where Nathalie said, you might want to consider doing this. You don't have to, but you told me about her death. You told me that it was hard for you to see her struggling to breathe. It might be a good idea to go and see her where she's, embalmed and looking more peaceful and more like herself. And take as much time as you need to be with her. I played some songs, say whatever you need to say, and be selfish and take as much time as you need. And I did. And I think if I was on someone else's timeline, or if I didn't have Nathalie's guidance, I maybe would have some regrets, or I maybe would have wished I had bathed her. It wouldn't have crossed my mind. I can tell you, I have no regrets. And when I look back at those 4 weeks, what a gift that I know that I was able to give her love and patience and foot rubs and her favorite music and dim the lights and her favorite foods and her favorite soups and brownies and all of her favorite things, because I had Nathalie's little seeds and offerings and guidance. And I don't regret the time that I spent with her. Of course, I wish it were more. Of course, doesn't everybody want more time? But I know that I made the best use of my time. And I know that I did that because I was supported on that journey.
Wow. Nathalie, how does it feel to know the impact of your service?
It feels warm and fuzzy. And it feels very humbling. This whole this is really about the loss of the ego. And so for us as servants and for our people we support, and that's really I can't put words on that. You know, Laurie,
Right.
thank you for sharing that. It feels beautiful. It feels like I'm useful. It feels like I have a purpose. I matter too. I mean, by helping you, Laurie, it was all about you and your mom. But since Deanna is asking, the reward is like, you know, I can be of service. I
Yeah,
can.
well, that's what inspires the doula is we want to be of use and of service in an area that we have a special affinity, or I don't know if you say gift, you know, anybody can walk anybody through birth and through death, but not everybody wants to. So the people that want to and feel inspired, definitely like the healer is healed as they heal. The healing it doesn't just go from the healer to the healed without bathing the healer and in any
Yes.
right. So
It's very also very important to know that, you know, I'm talking about me, but even Laurie as a birth doula, we have to have done the work in order, you know, we have had to have healed ourselves in order to help others heal.
Mhm.
And this is just the beauty of life.
yeah, you know, and the doula being I always like to say the doula is the biggest tool. So people want to say the tools of a doula are, you know, like guided meditation, you know, legacy, this and that. I really believe the biggest tool is the doula themselves, and everything else is just a cherry on the cake. So the healing that we continuously need to do, to me, until I'm dead too, is a journey of continual, it's just what I have to do to make sure that to stay as soft as you, Nathalie, to stay the way you were able to stay present and be with her.
And
If any
softness
of
is
us,
really what it is, that softness and that flexibility of the mind and of the body. And you know, even when Lynn died, you know, I lost a lot of energy and I was not there. And I had to replenish. Nothing like what Laurie went through, but just by being a witness, you know, you know that the energy goes into the universe. And we feel like when we're so involved, we really we feel like we lose some energy, and then we find ways to, especially with words like Laurie is using today, I replenish. And so, like an enzyme, right? I go back and I help and I rejuvenate, and then I can continue the
well,
process.
I would
Softness
not,
is very
let's
important.
focus on you for just a second. So Laurie shared with us her a tiny bit. I know there's a huge journey, but a little bit. She shared a little bit of her journey with her mom, which sounded just very beautiful, and a little bit with you, and a little bit what it felt for you. I want people to know, so who do I have to be to do something so amazing? And you said, just like an enzyme, it made me pop. She's a biologist. So even a biologist can do this? Even a brainiac biologist can do this. Yes. And no, you weren't like you weren't a hospice nurse like me.
No,
So talk a little bit about that. It doesn't matter about being medical. It's about heart.
yes, well, it did take some work,
Well,
because
yeah, it's of course,
you know
yes.
it did take some work. Interestingly speaking, I last week my ex-husband called me. So we were together when I was like 20. So I don't know, we divorced like 20 years ago. So we were before 30 years ago. So it's a long time ago. We were in our 20s. And we had remained friends, although, you know, we hadn't been in touch lately. And he said, I Googled you. He's in Canada. And he's a scientist, a professor. And he's like, I Googled you. And I said, oh, that's terrific. That's really, I'm so proud of you. He said, you know, you've always been a great scientist, but then you've always had that very special empathy. And you know, for somebody when he said that, he's remarried, I'm remarried, there's no, but it felt really good. And it's really a proof that if we want to do something, we 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 go dig into who we've always been. So yes, I was a scientist, and I'm still, think like a scientist. I'm not paid as a scientist. I don't work for a company or a university, but I think like a scientist, and that's definitely, so that's this design thinking that we can use pretty much in anything. What I used in science and developed in science, I can apply to my everyday life, to my business, to my relationships, to my work in the community. So it's really, what's the problem? How can we do, think about being there with Laurie. What's the problem? What's the crisis? What can I do? What are the tools I can use? And let me assess, after I applied those tools, to see if they work, and then go back through the circle and say, okay, what can I do differently? What would be useful to get to the results that we want to get, of comfort in this case, or in the case of science, of problem solving. So it's really that problem solving. But on the top of being a scientist, I've always had that special compassion. I mean, I've always been a hypersensitive person, and even to a point where people were saying, you're paranoid. And it turns out, that now I know that when I feel something, it's generally accurate. I've learned to
People
trust
call
myself.
us all kinds of things.
This, even at the time I was a scientist and I was working in the companies and people were making comments about me, I think they were very, they were really somehow envious or jealous, or they just didn't understand how hypersensitive and empathetic people are.
Yeah,
And
you
that's
mentioned
way to criticize. Yes.
so it's unusual for people to understand the journey of somebody like you. Yeah, of a doula.
And then when I can basically now, because I've done that work, and I've also done the work of self-awareness and self-image. Who am I, and how can I love myself in a way that serves me and that serves the world around me? And that was a very difficult part.
Well, that's an ongoing. That never
That's
stops.
that's ongoing, but that's where I get my softness now, because before I just didn't know I could be a scientist and I could be, serving other people toward in situations of vulnerability. In science, you don't talk about vulnerability. You have a problem, you find a solution. That's it. You move on.
But let me ask y'all this. I wanna address this because you all knew each other before this happened, Laurie, right? So you knew her for a couple of years. So we talk about closure a lot in hospice and end of life and any kind of emotional supportive endeavors and any kind of profession. I'm sure in the birth doula world, there's a closure with each client. And so you're here today. This happened 4 weeks ago. You obviously are still talking. I just wanted you all to you don't have to have any hard and fast anything, of course. But my feeling about end of life support is always one of a fluidity of you can't, in my opinion, maybe you can with the birth because the baby is born and not always, I understand, but there's a thing. But with dying and death, yes, the dying happened and it happened, the death happened. In my worldview about doula is let it be more fluid about that. Let that decision be made between you two. What about that? What about closure with your relationship around supporting her through the dying? Was said or not said, or what's your understanding?
Can I go? Can I say something, Laurie? To me, I felt like I had gotten Laurie to a place where she was comfortable with, not comfortable, we cannot say that, but comfortable with having been there for her mom, right? Having been there. But then there was a very acute time of grief. And so, I had supported Laurie, but I didn't feel like I could stop talking to Laurie, the day of the funeral. There was the day before of the viewing, there was the preparation, there was the viewing, there was the funeral itself, there was the burial. And then there was, the coming home and the very raw emotions of grief. Okay. So we were not able to see each other. We both needed a hug. I think the physical hug was a form of closure. And we actually, don't tell anyone, we did meet for coffee yesterday outside a coffee place on the table, and we did hug. And that was like, I see you, I know you've been through this, I know you're going through this. And we were able to connect physically to another. I know she's on the journey, but she's equipped. So she can call me anytime. But I feel like my job is done.
You know when you know. That's my whole point. It might be different for birth doulas, but in end of life, I really love what you said. But let's hear from Laurie. Laurie, what is your feeling about this? Since you're actually on a birth doula, too.
Yeah, so with birth clients, I remain on call for 6 weeks after the mom has had the baby, because providers typically don't see the mom until 6 weeks, right? So you see the baby at 2 weeks and a month, but what about mom, right? And I'm hired for mom typically. So if stuff's going to hit the fan, it's usually in those first 6 weeks. And so for some clients, I'm most helpful in those first 6 weeks. If it's a second baby or a third baby, sometimes less helpful.
Right.
So I appreciate that after the funeral, Nathalie didn't, block my number and be like, good luck with all that grief. And, again, gave me just tremendous advice to find people that I could, freely talk to about my mom and about what I had just been through, because it's like the hero's journey. And that grief isn't linear, that there are days where I'm, high functioning and great. I've got clean clothes on today. I'm showered. That was not the case yesterday. And that's okay. And so, when you have a contract, it's like, we needed an endpoint for the doula care, right? Obviously, if something came up at 8 weeks or 12 weeks, I would pick up the phone and say, oh, crap, breastfeeding isn't going well. Like, let me shoot you a resource in a neighboring town or whatever. So this is very, it's different, but I think the support that I've gotten from Nathalie, whether it be a 2-hour phone call or a text or a piece of music or a writing exercise, has been just as valuable as the information and resources and advice that she was giving me in those 4 weeks that I was in Pennsylvania with my mom. So, I agree with her. The hug was pretty epic. In our time of COVID, we're not hugging people. And I actually, when I got back into town, texted my nurse midwife friend, and we had masks on. And I said, can I transmit COVID through tears? Because people were coming and bringing me meals, and I didn't want to get them sick. I was in PA at my parents' house, not leaving for anything at all, but just in case. So, grief right now is just very difficult and very different. And so I think, especially for that reason, it was helpful for Nathalie to check in with me, like when I got home, and then a couple of days later, and then 2 weeks later, just to make sure I was okay, because I wasn't having those face-to-face conversations with friends who would normally step in. And so she's encouraging me to find people, maybe someone who's had a loss. It seems like I have some friends who are avoiding me, and that's okay. Because I realized I was avoiding death, and anybody who was experiencing a loss until I lost my mom. So, I accept my friends as they are. And if they can't be there for me, it's okay. I do have friends that are there for me, but it was so important for her to tell me, find my tribe, reach out to people, because as you can imagine, I'm, reliving and processing and, second guessing myself. And so to be able to tell my story and to talk about my mom is extremely important right now. And so that encouragement has been very helpful.
The doula role, because I'm also interjecting things people might not know. Most people don't know of us or what in the world we do or what are the standards or anything like that. That's all being worked out as we speak. We're very, 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 very brand new industry. I've only been doing it myself for 15 years. So when you think about that, and is very, 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 very new. So we're working things out. But one of the things I feel very strongly about is that every doula needs to have a before, during, and after death component to their practice. What you just described, Laurie, to a T, what Nathalie is providing to a T. The end isn't here yet, okay, with you two, obviously. And who knows, you're working it out. But that's the point that I feel that people really need to hear, is that it's not like therapy. It's not like psychotherapy. It's not like a social work visit. It's not like a hospice enrollment, because they have very specific endings, all of them.
In our business.
And in any business. But this is the part where it could feel a little, well, how do you? So that this is the thing, is that we don't want clients to feel like they now need to send us Christmas cards, because that's a burden. There needs to be a place where the doula and the person go, okay, I'm here for you. Call me if you need to. You won't be hearing from me again. That's the part that everybody will work out for themselves, I think. And it'd be nice when you just said about a 6-week availability to your clients as a birth doula. How does that feel to both of you? If you had something like, if that was the standard for an end of life doula, or do you think 3 months would be better? What is your feeling?
Yeah, that would be very useful to have your feedback, Laurie, as to set up the contracts. So to adjust.
I think it's going to vary from person to person. I mean, Nathalie and I have spoken a lot about like complicated grief. There's other family members that are going through more complex emotions. I think it would just really vary from person to person. And, I'm realizing there are a lot of similarities between what I did as a birth doula and what I offered my mom in terms of like comfort and care measures. And I said this to my mom when she was dying. She said, I don't know what to expect. Like, am I going to be okay? And I said to her, well, I don't know. I've never died before. If you were having a baby, I could walk you, right through that journey. And so, I said to Nathalie, like, what do I say to her? And she said, you tell her it's going to be okay. You get your brother to tell her it's going to be okay. You get your dad to tell her it's going to be okay. And so the difference here is that I don't have a newborn to come back to Connecticut with, right? I got to come back to Connecticut with my dad and this old dog and all of those complications and grief. So it's different. It's not going to be, and there isn't going to be a 6-week checkup with my provider to make sure that I've healed from the physical, it's different. So
it's very different.
I'd have to think about the timeline of that, but so far everything's been helpful.
Laurie, I thought about something you said yesterday, and I don't know if you want to share, but remember when we talked, about, and please feel free not to share if you don't want to. Remember when we talked about me telling you, before your mom died, said, but she's always going to be with you. And you thought I was like, telling you a story.
I thought that was, So I, my, family members, friends have had different losses, and my mom was very much in touch with this other realm, whatever you want to call it, the quantum field, energy, nature. And she would tell me things like, oh, look in that picture of our cousin, like that's that globe, that orb is his mom looking down on him. And I'd be like, isn't that so cute? That's just like, so just such a nice thing that her brain is doing for her. that must be so comforting, but is completely imaginary. Like how lovely that the body and the brain work together to play tricks to comfort you. And the night after my mom died, I was taking my dog out, which I had done many nights. She's a 16-year-old Chihuahua. And I was going to go back up to my childhood bedroom and sleep there for the first time in a couple nights, because I had been sleeping on the floor near her bed. And I felt this just warm wrap around my body, and it carried me all the way up. And when I got to my bedroom, it just released. And I got into my bed and I thought, thanks, Mom. That was really a hard trip up the steps. I really appreciate that. Freaked me out a little bit, so that every time I took Stella out after the fact, I put my back up against the brick wall. I was like, I'm good, Mom. Don't do that again. Like, go visit somewhere else. Someone else needs you tonight. But it, really like gave me but I get it now. I get it. I feel her. I see her. If I'm in the art room with my children making art, like the sun will come in and just shine, and my children can feel her. I couldn't feel her at the funeral, and she was with my youngest. And I saw my youngest squeezing my dad's hand every couple of minutes. And my youngest said to me, yeah, she was with me. And then when we got to the cemetery, she said goodbye to the kids. So they heard her voice. And so that was something that I wasn't open to, maybe because I hadn't experienced it. And so that was something that Nathalie had talked to me about. And I think you do have to be open to receiving those messages and those feelings. And I did a workshop around grief, and it was all about having a connection to nature. But my mom wasn't really into nature. So I was driving home one day from the store after my credit card got declined. It's another story for another day. And I'm like, Mom, this is not funny, like enough already. And I'm like, I don't see you, Mom. Like I haven't seen you in like 2 or 3 days, and I'm really missing you. And then I started seeing houses with the Christmas lights as I was driving home. And my mom loved Christmas. And I thought, okay, you're not going to be in nature. You're not going to be a bird. You're not going to be this or that, but you're going to be in different things that you loved. And you're going to remind me that we're going to celebrate this next holiday season without you. And it's going to be okay.
Wow.
Now you understand why I don't want to talk.
Oh.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing to sit with this holiday of seeing. I feel the rawness, and I also feel there's a new awareness in you somewhere that I feel. I'm can not put my finger on it, but Laurie, I can't. I mean, the first year always is very difficult. We all seem to experience that. And do you have a plan for yourself or your children or your family should you have a really hard day or afternoon or evening or anything like that?
So my children have been making fire mail. So they write to my mom, her first and last name, in case there's more than one Lynn in heaven. And they just send her messages, and we have a fire, and they throw in their messages. The last one last night was, I'm riding the bike that you bought me, Nana, and I think of you when I'm riding my bike. And so that's how they've been able to communicate with her. And, we talk about her every day. I do kid bedtime, and that's a way for us to check in and see how they're doing. And I get to talk to them about grief. I was telling them that my dad is very angry right now. And they're like, yeah, he yells at the dog and he calls the dog the wrong name. And I said, that's part of this process known as grief. And my oldest, my 10-year-old goes, there's more to this? And I said, oh, yes, there's Thanksgiving that we had to get through, we're coming up on Christmas for our family, her birthday, their anniversary. I said, oh, yes, honey, there's going to be more. And maybe mommy will be mad and maybe mommy will cry, but it's okay because I see her in them. When my kids hopped into the limo at the church and we rode over to the cemetery together, my daughter, my oldest, was very adamant about us getting Halloween candy because we had missed it. So she had little baggies that she had made and she gave out to my cousins and my brother and my dad. And I thought, that's my mom. My mom would pack snacks for everybody's day. So I know that her spirit and her generosity that come through me and go through to my children, they're not gone. And so if I can keep fostering that in them, then her legacy and her gifts and the joy that she brought to our family, they will live on. And so that to me is just a huge comfort, that when they are kind and selfless and giving, I see her.
Thank you.
That's,
Thank you.
that's one thing that I experienced with you, Laurie, that I had not really experienced with anyone else. I've experienced with, some family members and for people doing the planning, but not with somebody at the end of life. Is being able to work with somebody like you, who's very young, younger than me, and and a mom, is that I get to see the impact of my work with you as continuing with your teaching your children. And for me, that is something that I've had in mind for 2-3 years that I wanted to do. And actually with you, Laurie, I have been able to really implement it and nurture that, guiding for the next generations. And that gives me a lot of hope that people are going to be a lot better in the future.
Yep.
And this also emphasizes my belief that the sooner we can learn those skills, the better it is for ourselves, for
And our
our
next
parents,
generation.
and for our
Yep.
children,
Well,
or the next generations. You
Yep.
see, that is something that I really find beautiful, but very valuable for the society as a whole.
Yes, I want to validate that in that 1991, I had what they call a VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, in 1991 with 2 lay birth midwives. And what they gave our family was a healing from the trauma of what happened 2 years prior, and as well as the empowerment showed us how we could continue in the future, how I was ready for the next baby after that. Like there's something, a chain got broken of like a curse. Also, not only that, the things that we didn't know in our generational handing down of parenting in this way that I really love. Not that I didn't have good parenting, but there's something different. There was something healing that they introduced into me that I got to bring into my children, who now with their children, and they changed the trajectory of our whole life. So when my mom was dying, I remembered that, and I remembered feeling I can do this, because I was already a hospice experienced nurse in 2005, and I thought, this is what I want to do. What those birth midwives did for me and my family, and they changed our whole life. I know that we can do that for families that have had very sad, tragic death experiences. We can be with them, help them shift that whole thing, not by taking away the pain, but showing, maybe in talking about what, like they did for me. We talked about what happened, what could have been done better, what could have been, this is what we could do next time. That kind of thing really helps the whole thing. And like Nathalie just said, so that now your family, Laurie, you have more empowerment. You had said you felt empowered to do more. So it's a beautiful thing. And I feel that the end-of-life doula role will not only help provide a nicer passing, a nicer dying experience in that moment, it helps to heal things that have come before, and it's going to help lay a groundwork and a vision for the future. And that's what I built my school upon. And that's what our group is about. The doulas that are out there that invest in themselves, and they're part of a collective. It doesn't have to be my collective. It can be anything that you create that has support, loving but real, people who know what's going on. A support, so you're not out there winging it by yourself. We just can't do that. No, it's not meant to be that way. However each person does that, then I feel that we can have very responsible end-of-life care as an adjunct to hospice, because hospice has their role as plan of care provider, and doulas are an adjunct to that. a very deep, powerful, like Nathalie was for you, didn't take away hospice.
Mm-mm.
She added a depth and a thing that went beyond hospice.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to share that, Laurie, but the bereavement, we could cut it if it's necessary. The bereavement at hospice was actually not available during the holidays.
Yeah, so the newly bereaved group for our local hospice doesn't meet till January. So I can't really schedule my grief for January. It's just here and it's right in front of me. But so
okay.
Yeah. And, you know, it was helpful for Nathalie to remind me that they are a business. And so, you know, they're in a caring profession, but, you know, there weren't people to host those meetings through November and December. But I'm as a doula very resourceful.
Odd.
Yeah. Because I know I'm not ready for a death cafe. I know I'm not ready for I need the newly bereaved group right now.
Yes, and that's also a reason why I continued, talking with you, because you didn't have that, and we tried to find, solutions that would give you that width. There are some people. There are times you will want to talk. There are times we want to cry. There are times so we looked into art. We looked into other projects and taking care of yourself in different ways. In January, I think you will benefit from that group.
Sure.
But there was this need for certain continuity.
That's interesting. I'm going to look into the locally here if anybody's postponing due to, are they budget cutting? Are they sending people away? They're not having the same role, like, what is it, as many employees? Are they cutting people? Like, that's so odd to me that they would.
You would think the holidays would be a special time.
Adding extra people.
Support.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have not heard that. And thank you for sharing that.
That was in PA, so I've been able to find resources here.
And we cannot generalize. I did ask somebody I know.
What did they say?
From Connecticut, they said that they had something, but they have something, but like somebody like Laurie could not have used a certain hospice organization and then go to another one and say, hey, I want your bereavement support, right? They're not going to do that. So they do a lot of volunteer calls, bereavement calls, because the hospice volunteers cannot really be there in person. So if they can be of support for the bereavement, they send volunteers, and they manage. But
okay, this brings up an excellent point. So people will say
it's not easy, but again, every company is going to be different. So I cannot generalize.
Well, this brings up an excellent point of this, is that people will ask, what's the difference between hospice and doulas? Why do you need a doula when there's hospice? And here's a perfect reason, is that the business of hospice, even though many are nonprofits, there are others that aren't nonprofit, but it doesn't matter nonprofit or not nonprofit. It doesn't matter the tax status. It matters that for whatever reason, they might not be able to do thus and so, or the volunteer that does thus and so isn't equipped to do the other thing. But with a doula, an end-of-life doula will do what you need if they're able, and they're your person, and they're consistent, and they stay
help
with
you find some resources where you are. I mean, before COVID, it would have been just fine to go to a bereavement group at a local church,
right?
Whether you belong to that church or not, you would have been able. They cannot deny you access, but you can't, because there are no such meetings right now.
Right. And the social worker who was assigned to our family, because my mom died, won't meet with my dad, even though my dad had a good relationship with him. And we had gone through more than one social worker until we found a man. And we called him because we were in a crisis after my mom died. And he said, I'm sorry, I was actually your mom's social worker. I can't meet with you guys anymore. So again, I had some feelings around that. And Nathalie had to say, remember that this is a business, and,
So this is why that we need doulas alongside hospice, because hospice provides so much, but it's very limited in some ways, and it can be limiting. And we need to be there to stand in the gap to be a bridge and to be a depth of support that hospice may not be able to provide.
Right.
And Nathalie, you were able to do that for Laurie, and Laurie was able to get something she might not have even got to have otherwise.
She was
So
able
thank
to
you.
receive. She was
Yes,
able to receive, which
she was able to.
something
Well, thank you all.
very rare.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing your story. Thank you so much, and blessings to both of you in this holidays. And thank you for the courage to share your stories. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me.